But where do you stand, Scott? Are you for this invasion or not? You seem to be dancing around the question.
No,
you think this was a good idea?
No, I'm quite for it.
And you think that was?
I'm very loud about that.
I think these butchers deserve to die, not just because of the missiles, not just because of the nuclear program, but for 47 years, Josh, they have waged war against Western civilization, against the United States. Their mantra is death to America. They have killed American soldiers, American personnel. They have maimed people, our people. And so if you want to go back decades or you want to go back 2 weeks, there's plenty of reasons to believe that those people that we kill being gone is good for U.S. national security. That's my view.
They have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
So let's slow this down for a second, because what you just watched is exactly the problem. We went from imminent threat to they deserve to die in under 30 seconds. That's not a clarification. That's a collapse of the argument. First, it's self-defense. Then it's proactive defense. Then it's decades of revenge. Which one is it? Because those are not the same thing. And when the justification shifts that fast, it tells me something very simple. They don't have a clean explanation. If this was truly about protecting American lives from an immediate threat, the answer would be clear, consistent, and boring. Instead, it's emotional, it's historical, it's reactive, and now we're debating whether this is even a war or just combat operations. When bombs are falling, semantics don't protect anyone. So the real question is this: are we watching strategy unfold, or are we watching justification being built in real time? Let me know in the comments what you honestly think.
The White House has had trouble hammering down exactly what their objectives are with this strike against Iran. President Trump tried to clear some of that up today. Destroying Iran's missile capabilities and its navy? Is it stopping any development of a nuclear weapon and preventing them from arming terrorists? And the question on everyone's minds, why now? Well, here's how Marco Rubio tried to explain it. Listen.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage.
So the logic here is that Iran would respond to an attack not by us, but by someone else, Israel, and that we would proactively attack them to prevent them from attacking us. That explanation, needless to say, is not going over well, certainly among Democrats. But I just heard in the last hour a Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee saying, I'm not so sure that that's the explanation that will work for him.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a war in search of a justification, Abby, because remember, the reason why the march to war actually started was because of the Iranian protests in early January that were brutally and bloodily put down by the Iranian regime. Trump was writing on social media, help is on the way, come out, overthrow your government. He didn't help them. The protesters got slaughtered. And then gradually it took a month or two to build up U.S. forces in the region. And that time, the rationale for the war shifted again from helping the protesters to doing something about the Iranian nuclear program. But the problem is the two justifications that the administration put forward, neither one of those constituted an imminent threat, because we know that Iran was not enriching uranium. They basically stopped since the June attack, when, remember, Trump said he had totally obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. He had certainly set it back a good deal. And there was no evidence that the Iranians were building missiles, ICBMs, capable of hitting the United States. And so now they're really grasping for straws. And so you had Secretary Rubio come up with this far-fetched explanation that the imminent threat was Israel was going to attack Iran, and then we had to attack Iran, because if Israel attacked Iran, Iran would attack the U.S., which is ridiculous, because Israel had never before attacked Iran before Donald Trump became president. Are you telling me that President Trump could not prevent his close ally, Bibi Netanyahu, from attacking Iran? I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we all know, Netanyahu has wanted to attack Iran for a long time, 40 years. He said so just this week. And as Ruben Gallego put it, as a Democratic senator, so now Netanyahu decides when we go to war. What the F happened to America first?
Right. I mean, it's kind of amazing that 3 days into the war, that's what they're going with. That's what they actually came up with, that Israel dragged Trump into the war. Which
and I will say, to be fair, not even to be fair, but just it seems based on the reporting that it is true that Netanyahu personally launched a campaign with President Trump over the last month and a half to convince him to go to war with
Netanyahu's been launching that campaign for several decades. This is nothing new. This is what he's been wanting for pretty much his entire professional life. And the fact that the Trump administration's official explanation is that Bibi dragged us into this war, I don't think that's going to play well. Not with just the left and the Ruben Gallegos of the world, but with his base, too. He doesn't seem to care that they are very much against the idea of America going to war in the Middle East again, and especially on behalf of the Israelis, whether that's true or not. We don't even know if that's really true. And so what we're seeing 3 days into this war is tactical brilliance. The U.S. military is amazing. They hit everything they wanted to hit. They killed more people than they thought they could kill. And strategic bankruptcy, because every single day, almost every single hour, the explanation changes. And if we don't know where we're going, then any road will take us there. And nothing about this was imminent. Nothing about this is a justification that has any resemblance to international or U.S. law.
If you want to understand Israel's influence in this war, then you just have to listen to what Stephen Witkoff had to say about the nuclear weapons and the Iranians' capability to enrich more stockpile.
They've been enriching well beyond the number that you need for civil nuclear. It's up to 60%. They're probably a week away from having industrial grade bomb making material. And that's really dangerous.
Since the beginning of last year that regime change was always an interest of this administration. So I knew that. And after June, after the strikes of last June, there was always an expectation that there would be round two. And so I view the urgency, if you will, if you can call it an urgency, that steeped in two issues. The first is that since June, after they were weakened with the strikes against the nuclear program, the Iranian regime reflected a desire to double down on their nefarious objectives. They continued to fund terrorist proxies across the region. Last year, they gave $1 billion to Hezbollah alone, and that's for a regime that has no economic leg to stand on. So they continue to do that. And we know that they were trying to retrieve elements of their nuclear program, at least. I'm obviously not privy to classified information, so I can't say that I don't know more beyond that. But the point is, on one hand, you had a proof that nothing was deterring this regime from its objectionable behavior. We have a regime now that has been a thorn in our side in national security. When I worked in counterterrorism in the Middle East, the majority of our resources, time, staff, were focused on threats emanating from the Iranian regime and its proxies. And so suddenly you have it at the weakest point it has ever been in 4 decades. And on top of it, you see them trying to rebuild and double down on their efforts. And so I think the urgency came from an opportunity they wanted to seize, that this was the time to cut its legs off and see if they could push for a regime change.
None of that has anything close to an imminent threat in it. You're not even claiming that there was
imminent.
Well, that's what the administration is claiming, because that's the only legal justification for attacking.
Justification.
A legal justification for going to war and putting American blood and treasure at risk. And yes, there should be some legal justification. And if we're just attacking every country that's a problem and that's weak, well, that's a long list of countries that you're now advocating that we should attack.
If bombs dropping on the nuclear program and destroying them last year didn't help move forward those objectives of deterring the regime, why do we think that suddenly this is going to do the same thing?
Because
here's where this entire narrative completely unravels. Every time someone asks a direct question, the reasoning changes. At first, it was about supporting Iranian protesters. Remember that? Help is on the way. Then thousands died, and that explanation quietly disappeared. Then it became about nuclear weapons, even though we were told not long ago the nuclear program had already been obliterated. Then it shifted to ballistic missiles. Then suddenly it became, well, Israel might attack Iran. And if Israel attacks Iran, Iran might retaliate against us. So we had to strike first. That is not clarity. That is strategic scrambling. And when Abby presses the most basic logical question, if bombing didn't change political behavior last year, why would bombing change it now? There's no clean answer. Instead, the emotional truth slips out. They deserve to die. That's not imminent threat language. That's moral outrage language. And there's a difference, a massive difference. You can argue Iran has been hostile for decades, fine. But that is not the same as proving an immediate, unavoidable danger that required action this week. When leaders blur that line, trust erodes because people can handle hard truths. What they don't tolerate well is moving goalposts. If this is about long-term regional power dynamics, say that. If it's about protecting Israel, say that. If it's about nuclear capability, show the evidence and stick to it. But when the explanation morphs, depending on who's speaking, it starts to feel less like strategy and more like justification chasing the decision. And that's the part people are reacting to. So ask yourself, honestly, are you convinced by this evolving explanation, or does it feel like they're reverse engineering the reason after the fact? Tell me below.
The people who weren't deterred are now dead. That's number one.
But this is Iran. Those people are dead, but there are other people. They've got plenty of people. Scott,
I agree with you on that.
Plenty of Ayatollahs.
There's no indication.
7 layers deep on
we are 72 hours into this.
You're making a good case for this.
There's no indication, as we sit here tonight, that there have been any political changes in Iran. So my question is, if bombs dropping a year ago didn't change it, what is the rationale for thinking that bombs dropping today are going to change the actual political dynamics on the ground in Iran?
Well, look, you're asking a broad question about justification and what we intend to do with these guys over the long term. The justification is, A, we had a huge problem with the ballistic missiles, and we did believe that if Israel, according to the Secretary of State, attacked, and they intended to attack, that our bases were going to be targeted. They were not willing to absorb that attack, so we attacked. That is what the Secretary of State has said. You can agree with it, disagree with it, but that is the justification. That's number one. Number two,
you think that makes sense? You think?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the Iranians are not shy about firing ballistic missiles across the region. I was in Israel last summer and watched many of them in the sky.
Where do you stand, Scott? Are you for this invasion or not? You seem to be dancing around the question.
No,
you think this was a good idea?
No, I'm quite for it.
And
I think these butchers deserve to die, not just because of the missiles, not just because of the nuclear program, but for 47 years, Josh, they have waged war against Western civilization, against the United States. Their mantra is death to America. They have killed American soldiers, American personnel. They have maimed people, our people. And so if you want to go back decades or you want to go back 2 weeks, there's plenty of reasons to believe that those people that we kill being gone is good for U.S. national security. That's my view.
And it's just so sad to see the worst of our humanity being manifest once again with all of this vicious, organized hatred, revenge, lies, crimes, cruelty, barbarity. And you get justifications from a variety of different camps, but at least we should try to aspire to some moral consistency and some ethical integrity. When I look at it, I just follow Martin King. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I want to be in solidarity with anybody who's suffering. I come from a Christian tradition. We all made in the image and likeness of a loving and living God, and therefore we all have a dignity and a sanctity that the world can't take away and the world didn't give us. That's true for Palestinians, it's true for Iranians, it's true for Ethiopians, it's true for Israelis, it's true for Nigerians across the board. Now, when you look at it in that way, what do you see? What I see is, I see the gangsterism coming out of the White House. They lying, they rationalize, they killing American citizens here and rationalizing and telling lies. When I look at Israel, I see a government that's lying and got to deal with genocide with the noose around his neck. When I look at Iran, I see the gangsters who've been running that for 46 years, and I stand in very deep solidarity with the suffering and the heroic struggles of the Iranian people. Now, what kind of implications does that have for such a view? It means, in fact, that we're going to have to reshape our framework, and we got to get beyond these little partisan points we make or tribal moves we make or international relations discourse that's only about power and has little to say about moral power and moral integrity.
May have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
This is where things get serious, and not in the dramatic cable news way, in the real world consequences way. When leadership cannot clearly define whether the country is at war, that's not a minor communication issue. That's instability at the strategic level. Some are calling it war. Others insist it's not war, just strategic strikes. Others say it's combat operations. But here's reality. When bombs are deployed, when American forces are exposed, when regional escalation is possible, you don't get to hide behind vocabulary. Words matter because they signal intent, limits, and objectives. And right now, the messaging feels scattered. Tactical success does not automatically equal strategic clarity. You can hit every target and still have no long-term roadmap. You can eliminate commanders and still have no plan for what comes next. We've seen this before, rapid military execution followed by years of political ambiguity. The American public is not asking for perfection, they're asking for consistency. Is this about nuclear prevention? Is this about deterrence? Is this about regime change? Is this about protecting an ally? Or is this about reasserting dominance in a region that's been volatile for decades? Because if the answer changes every 48 hours, people are going to question whether there was ever a stable objective in the first place. Accountability is not disloyalty, clarity is not weakness, and demanding a coherent explanation before sliding deeper into conflict is not anti-American, it's responsible citizenship. So I'll leave it with you. Does this feel like a focused, necessary operation with defined boundaries, or does it feel like a war being reframed in softer language so it lands better politically? Drop your perspective in the comments. Let's have the conversation.